Be sure to watch my TED Talk on londonreal.tv. All right, here we go, guys. This is Silicon Reel, the video podcast dedicated to the people of the London technology startup scene. I am Brian Rose. I also host London Reel, which is a similar three-person trialogue format. We have guests like Tim Ferriss from the 4-Hour Workweek, futurist Jason Silva, drug smuggler Howard Marks was sitting in your chair, Simon. And yesterday we had Bruce Perry from Tribe. Who was here. He was intense, man. He was talking about going to Africa and doing all this crazy shit. So so check that out if you like. My co-host today is entrepreneur Colin Pyle, who comes to London from Canada, Toronto. We're not holding that against you. You've also, ouch. Yeah, you've also spent some time in China and India with these massive motorcycle rides, which are very cool to watch. So hopefully. I love your China bike ride, and India is coming soon, right?
Yeah, it should be on Travel Channel end of this year, hopefully.
Okay, cool. And Silicon Reel is your brainchild. You're the reason we're here. Episode 13. It's fun as hell.
Is that a lucky one or unlucky one?
I'm always a big fan. Lucky 13.
Lucky 13?
Yeah, so it's all good. Our guest today is Mr. Simon Devonshire, who is the director of new business ventures for Wayra Europe. Yeah. Wayra is a startup technology, startup accelerator owned by Telefonica, the global communications company, right? Yep. You guys launched in Latin America and Spain in 2011, and you now have 14 academies in 12 countries.
Yep.
That's big. The startups that you accept receive funding up to £40,000 plus office space and mentoring.
Yes.
Okay, welcome to Silicon Reel.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure. It's good to have you here. You know, it's interesting. Colin and I have kind of been around the block now when it comes to the Silicon Roundabout. You know, we've talked to VCs, we talked to startups, some equity crowdfunding, and even a couple small incubators, right? So we kind of know our stuff. But I mean, I was looking at Wayra today, and you know, you guys are a different animal. You know, you're bigger. You put up bigger chunks of cash. I think you just accepted 10 people into your is it your unlimited academy?
Exactly.
And so like that's kind of big news. And like it seems like you got a lot of people that are helping out. You got big open office space in Tottenham Court Road, and I wonder if you could just tell us about Wayra, because some people haven't heard of it. So.
I never assume that people have heard it. In fact, I don't assume that people have heard of Telefonica, frankly. In the UK, obviously, Telefonica is famous for the O2 brand. As you said, Wayra is the business accelerator of Telefonica. We're wholly owned by Telefonica. And it's a very simple concept. We build a physical space, we run a competition, we find the best digital talent, we invest in it and we accelerate it. We take an equity stake. And you know, our whole purpose for being is to see those businesses grow. So that's our measure of success, that's our performance metric, and that's what we're measured for and by. I think it's important to really emphasize that, because I think people think that maybe this is some kind of corporate social responsibility or marketing activity or something to do with sustainability, or maybe it's a youth program or something of that nature. And it's none of those things. This is a commercial venture. It's about investment, and it's about, you know, working hard to grow the book value of that investment. So with regard to age, for instance, Wayra is a very inclusive program. So I'd say that typically the average age is kind of 32. In London, it's probably nearer 37. You know, they're not chosen by me, and they're not chosen by Telefonica or O2. These startups are chosen by an expert panel of judges who we appoint. And what's interesting about that is they tend to choose people who are a bit more seasoned, a bit more experienced, been around the block, got a bit more life experience. And that's reflected in the type of businesses that we invest into. The thing that unites them is they're all digital. They're not just telco or mobile. They're not just apps. They're very diverse, very eclectic. What we're looking for really is stuff that we think we can add value to. at the end of the day.
Now you say it's digital. What makes it digital? I mean, it can't be like a juice company startup. There has to be some angle.
Well, it could be a juice company,
tricky.
provided that there is a sufficient, provided that digital is at the heart of it. So, for instance, if it was a juice company that enabled people to, I don't know, aggregated recipes from around the world, that in choosing the juice of your choice, that you could walk down Tottenham Court Road and not have to queue to order it, that, predictively, there's predictive intelligent convenience built into some kind of platform that kind of predicted that you were in need of a juice and you could just roll up and your whole transaction was automated and everything else, then we'd be kind of interested in that. So provided that digital is a fundamental component of whatever the venture is, then that's cool from our point of view.
It's weird because you don't see a lot of huge corporates, let alone telecommunication giants, setting something up like this, unless I've been misinformed. You don't even see a lot of big companies, banks, consultancy firms. I mean, it seems like everybody wants to get into this, but no one seems like they're cutting the check or setting up an independent way of doing it.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Why? I mean, you don't think of... I'm sorry, I don't mean to... Yeah. Telefonica, you don't think of them as being the guys that are way out in front, but they are in this case.
Well, I think they are. I think, and I want to change that. I don't want... so I look around a lot, and you're right, I don't see anything that's quite comparable to this yet, and I want there to be more. Many more, and I'll explain why. I think we have a unique asset, and it's, to be honest, it's my boss and my boss's boss. They're very visionary guys, and Jose Maria, effectively, is the CEO now of Telefonica globally. And it was really his brainchild and his championing of this that makes it possible, because believe me, it's really hard to be that entrepreneurial within a corporate environment. So unless you have somebody who is constantly there to, in many ways, protect it, if I'm honest, it could quite easily get swamped by the corporate monster. And I think some of the things that corporate peers struggle with is getting through all of that bureaucracy necessary to make something like this happen. So I see a lot of enthusiasm. I mean, I've had conversations with corporates as diverse as a Formula One motor racing team through to household grocery goods manufacturers, even high street retailers, household names. Frankly, they've all been in to the academy at some point or other. And when I say they, I mean, CEO level, to the extent that now it's a weekly thing, literally every week. But getting them from that enthused, impassioned conversation into, as you say, writing a check and actually making this happen is clearly a big step. Now, I think Microsoft are doing some great stuff now. I hear that they've got some incubators that are starting to launch. And
what about Google? They kind of have like Google Ventures?
Yeah, they've got Google Ventures, they've got Campus.
Right.
But that is quite different. So Campus describes itself as an open source building, and I think that's magic. There's no doubt that that is a real gravity point of absolute density, and I do believe that density is a core component of this ecosystem. And I think Google have done an incredible job of driving that, Easy especially, his championship. I think also just the name, the brand, their investment in Tech City and in Shoreditch kind of validates everybody else's conviction to be here. So I think that's really awesome. And they're a house now that contains loads of really interesting rooms. They've got all sorts going on there, including incubators. Wayra is quite different to that. We're not an open source building. We have 24 security. We're closed.
Okay, and you're not in Shoreditch.
We're not in Shoreditch, which is a big decision and one that I've got in quite a lot of trouble for. But it's a decision that I'm really proud of. I think that the location we're in is fantastic, and what it gives us is an amazing office space where effectively everybody is on one floor. So we don't have that kind of divisiveness of one floor playing off another floor kind of thing. I mean, I've contradicted that because we've just opened another floor in the building, which is to house the unlimited
for the
thing.
new grads, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's but I'm making a massive investment to literally in the next couple of weeks we start work to cut the concrete between the two floors, and we've designed a staircase. It's a massive staircase we're putting in to connect the two together. Yeah,
that's cool.
So it's the space is really important, and we invest a lot of money in the space, which is really important because we're leveraging goodwill and discretionary effort everywhere, and when you guys come, I mean, you've been on there.
Yeah.
You know, if you were to have a meeting there by, you know, basically if you chat up the team who run it, then they'll let you in, kind of thing. If you have a meeting there, you might be compelled to bring other people who are key to the ecosystem into the building. Now, if you do that and the building's a bit shit, that's just not cool. So one of the reasons why we create an amazing space is to, and I hate the term elitist and elitism, but, you know, frankly, we're trying to draw in the best talent we can, the best startups, the best entrepreneurs, the best coaches, the best mentors, and the best investors. And, you know, my experience is, you know, O2's headquarters is in Slough. It's a pretty tough job to get the investor community to come out and engage, and I think it's quite unlikely I'm going to get them to Slough.
To someone who's not listening to us in London, how would you describe Slough? And be very careful.
Yeah, exactly.
So I went there. I ran the business, the B2B division of O2 for 57 months. So I went there pretty much every
Counting
day.
every month.
Exactly that. Yeah, and it's important because, you know, the average tenure in that industry is 9 months. So, you know, 57 is quite some record. And, you know, I have to tell you, the O2 campus there is incredible. It's a beautiful place to be. But because of the nature of the work and the people who you work with, you never get beyond the campus. So I can't actually answer your question, what is Slough, because I never actually went into the town. I only went to the Bath Road Slough Trading Estate, which is famous from The Office. And that was our home.
Yeah, so the office, the original office.
The original office.
Yeah, not the American one. That was second.
Yeah.
They're based in Slough, right?
Yeah.
There's an old poem about Slough, I think.
There is.
Yeah. I don't know it by heart.
I mean, generally, in summation of the poem, it's best avoided. But it's kind of like the staff canteen until recently.
Were you inspired by like Google? Because Google, I think, was made famous by the design of their workspace, as far as the proximity of people, you know, the beverages and everything, making everyone communicate and work together. I mean, what did you study to create the Wayra building?
Space. So I didn't design it. I probably had too much of a hand in its construction, but it's only because I interfere a lot and I'm, you know, fairly...
Micromanager?
Yeah, kind of maybe slightly on the borderline edge of obsessive on the detail thing.
It can be a compliment.
Well, maybe, I'm not sure the team would regard it as that. But anyway, I could show you the 28 emails about the expansion strips in the concrete. No, to your point, we use the same team of architects, a company called QA, an incredible, relatively small practice based in Madrid, and they've designed all of our academies globally, and we've learned exponentially from having that consistency. What we try to do is kind of McDonald's-fy that in terms of standardization. So there are several bits of furniture that literally are identical in every single academy, because we want that... it's not just that we want uniformity, it's that we want to really leverage the fact that we have this global network, because I think that is really unique. And I think it's really important because, for instance, in Ireland, the economy is still having a pretty tough time. But 2 of our startups in Dublin, in the first cohort, are now actively selling in Latin America. Now, that's important. It's important for several reasons. One, the economies in Latin America are now growing exponentially. So Brazil, 5% growth in the last year, which is great. So relative to Ireland, that's really important. Secondly, it's important because for those particular teams, selling out there, selling in Latin America is pretty much unimaginable before they joined Wayra, and then it became a high priority. So to go from unimaginable to a high priority and then to actually kind of happening is quite an amazing thing. And the third reason it's important to Ireland is we laugh with our colleagues, particularly Carl and Gav, who run Wayra Dublin, that they never see the sun. So that connection to Latin America is all the more powerful. In fact, if we phone them right now, I'm sure it's raining.
I never thought of it that way.
How do you sort of manage to connect all the because you know 14 globally, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
To sort of, and is there 10 in each one? Is that?
It's all good questions. So in terms of the number of businesses in the academies, 10 in each, apart from London and Sao Paulo, who have 20.
Okay.
And it's exponentially harder work. It's not just a doubling; it's quite incredible the effect that has. In terms of the connectivity between them, we work hard. We have a global technology platform that enables that integration, a global kind of, if you like, a data management repository. We have a global management team headed by my boss in Madrid, and that's their job to really get that coordination. I'm really focused on just Europe, and I concentrate, exclusively on that. And we bring the academy directors together as frequently as we can. So we're all meeting in Barcelona on Monday, but that's a global meet. So that's literally coming from all the LATAM academies as well.
Right. That's a tough business trip, Barcelona.
Well, actually, this is the thing. I'm so lucky. In Europe we have London, Dublin, Munich, Madrid, Barcelona, and Prague. So and we've got what I would describe grade A1 locations in every one of those cities as well. We're purposefully in their equivalent of the West End, and there are all sorts of reasons why we've chosen that. But we also integrate the startups by virtue of the different events that we attend. So one of the things that's great about this ecosystem is just how collaborative it is. And it was only a week or so ago we had Campus Party in London. So we invested in bringing in some of our team from all across Europe, and then the teams themselves pay their own money to attend. So we help them with the tickets and all that kind of stuff, but they've got to want it. So they pay for their own travel and accommodation and everything, and they come, and they genuinely hang out, and there's a lot of cross-pollination, cross-fertilisation. And that's the key ingredient for Wayra, because before they come, they're the best of the best, these guys. They fret and they worry about the quality of the coaching and mentoring. The truth is they get more from one another than they will from anyone else.
Interesting, because you hear incubators talk about what they're going to give you, right. But I rarely hear that angle. They're going to be collaborating, with each other. You're obviously probably a cost center for Telefonica. I mean, you probably, are going to be losing money for a while because your percentages in these new companies could take, 7 to 10 years to come to fruition. Do you have like a certain amount of time before they're going to come in and shut you down?
Yeah.
Or, I mean, because like you said, it's hard to get an investment like that.
Yeah.
If it's growing exponentially, I'm guessing your costs are growing exponentially.
So we're managing to control the costs, interestingly. Obviously, in the initial period, I negotiated some really interesting deals on, kind of the rents and that kind of thing. But we are keeping really close control of the costs, and relative to the multi-billion scale of Telefonica, the total cost of Wayra globally is not much more than a rounding error, frankly, for a corporate of that size. But that's not to say it's not trivial, and we are under a lot of pressure. So are the operating businesses. It's quite well known that the telco industry generically is having a tough time of it. There's a lot of competition, there's regulation, and there's all sorts of pressures and strains within that industry. So if you're in the front line running that business, and then you look at, there's this Devonshire guy with this flamboyant office that he's got,
Really?
There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure on that. But to your point, we're 2 years in. We've seen an exponential shift in the quality of the businesses that we're working with now. Last year, we were investing 40,000 euros for a 10% equity stake, which would value those businesses pre-money at 400,000 euros. Today, we have businesses that are being valued literally in the tens of millions of euros. And to see that seismic shift in such a short period of time, which a year ago we were having conversations with VC, and it was quite apparent that we are pre-VC, that our startups, even when they leave us, are pre-VC. Now we're having meaningful conversations with VCs because we're not. We're actually in their heartland now with some of our startups. So
maybe you are making a profit.
Well, we absolutely intend to. The problem, as you well identify, is that you need a track record of probably 4 or 5 years, and so in many ways, I guess part of my job is to keep the thing alive, because at the end of that kind of time period, the numbers should stand for themselves. So that's why I work as hard as I work. To keep this thing motoring on, and I'm confident in it. If I can see differences in every country. I'm very lucky by virtue of my job to have that perspective right across Europe, and there is significant cultural differences in each country. But we have some countries where I think unequivocally, Wayra is working, and London is one of those. Dublin is another. And we get that computationally through all the metrics and mathematics of what we do. So the physical number of applications, the scores that those applications achieve through the filtering process, the quality of their pitching, which again is scored, and then the number of investor conversations and the amount of money they're raising. All those metrics are going through the roof. Hard to look at the actual startups who are with us right now because they're so embryonic. But if you look at the alumni, we've got nearly 100 startups now who have moved beyond Wayra. We've invested 4.6 million euros in them. They've attracted 11.3 million. So already we're more than doubling the money that's going into them. And I think that is a lead indicator of where we're going to see this going.
One question Colin and I always ask whoever's here, whether it's a VC or a startup, is we ask, why will you win in this space? And it's a little bit different, I guess, with an incubator. But you must hate getting lumped in with a lot of incubators because they're everywhere right now. Yeah. And you've touched on a few things why you think Wayra is different. But why will you guys win? I mean, what do you do differently at a core or at an advice level or something? Because a lot of people seem to get it wrong, this space.
So I think we're still learning a lot, and I'm not proposing for one moment that we've cracked it and that we've got the magic ingredient. I don't think yet there is a formula that guarantees business success or startup success. I do think that we are learning a lot though, and I do think we're getting nearer and nearer to a formulaic approach. If you do these things, you will outturn a successful business. Genuinely, I think we're approaching that kind of science. But in answer to your question, why Wayra, why Telefonica? Simply put, fast-track access to potentially 300 million customers. So television took, reputedly, according to the internet, 38 years to reach an audience of 50 million people. Facebook took less than 2. Theoretically, with our resources, we could do it in a heartbeat. It's not easy and it's not trivial, and we've got to get the right proposition, the right entrepreneur. You've got to create a perfect storm. And if it were easy, we'd have done it ourselves, or Telefonica would have done it ourselves. But the reason why I'm so passionate about corporates being in this space is there are loads of different investment vehicles, VCs, you mentioned institutional investors, angel investors, whatever. The thing that we've got that they don't have is that fast-track route to market. Now, if you take Telefonica, we invest in a music startup, and as a result of our investment, they're worth X times what they might have otherwise been worth. But imagine if they were backed by us and EMI and Universal. You'd probably double it instantly again. And, the global resources that you could then bring to that startup, as I said, you can't guarantee their success, but what you should be able to do is really motor them if they've got the right ingredients.
Yeah, Telefonica is a big company. If you don't know it, look it up.
How hands-on are you with so you bring Telefonica and the international network and access to a huge market, but are you guys actually also very hands-on with your entrepreneurs?
Yeah, we increasingly so. I'm thrilled that we were able to recruit. We've had some amazing academy directors run our cohorts, okay? So we had Ashley Stockwell run the first cohort for London, and now we have Charmaine Egbury, who is incredible. Charmaine's philosophy is lean in, and so she's absolutely gone from a relatively passive program to a highly involved program, and she's actively coaching and mentoring those businesses at a very personal level on a weekly basis. So they are getting quite a lot of intervention, which is a positive thing. I personally am not so involved. I was originally, and it breaks my heart. So I now walk into academies and meet people who I ought to know, and frankly couldn't even place what startup they're in. But my portfolio is I have more than 120 startups now in my portfolio, and I just personally can't keep a track of all of them in that personally connected way.
Sure.
So I get all the reports and analysis through. But what's interesting is when I speak to people, the extent to which people are compelled and want to fuck around with startups, it really amazes me. And I'm really keen to not do that and not be party to it. I think if the guys need help or want help, they'll ask for it. I think you need to lay out a program that they can actively engage in and participate in that adds value to them. But they ultimately run their own business. If I can impart some wisdom, it's partly to do with hindsight because I've got a ton of relevant experience in there. I know exactly what it's like to be in their shoes. I've co-founded 7 startups now, and but it's more about foresight than anything else. It's, you know, how can you save them from some of the pain that you might have experienced before in your kind of lifetime. But I don't feel compelled to just go up and preach to them. It's sort of quite the opposite, really.
It must be hard to resist yourself sometimes.
Sure, yeah. And what about your alumni? Because your alumni, in theory, is just going to continue to grow. Do you have to hire, like, every year a new team to help the alumni?
We haven't, and I think we need to. So we're still debating what best to do there. They vary a lot in terms of their level of engagement, and at the moment we've absolutely left that to them to determine. So we've asked them to adhere to a rigid structure of interaction with us, and some have, others haven't. Now, I think without wanting to become heavy-handed with the alumni, I think what that indicates to me is we haven't quite got the formula right yet. Okay. And what we need is for them to be compelled to, because of the value and benefits it brings to them. Right. And I think it's relatively low touch. You know, as an investor, it's not unreasonable for us to expect them to, you know, submit all their reports and management accounts to us and so forth. And, you know, I guess, you know, in the world of a startup, shit happens, and sometimes reporting back to your investors can be a relatively low priority when you've got, you know, when you've got a burning platform.
Sure.
You know, we always try to hit you with a couple like devil's advocate questions, so I'm going to start if you don't mind.
Yeah.
But you know, the one thing, well, two things actually. Sometimes people have told me that London is over incubated. Yeah. There's a lot of different programs that are accepting people and putting the money in, and then, you know, keeping their hopes up or wasting their time. We had, you know, a couple of the VC guys even said that. Of course, maybe they would say that. Yeah. And the other piece I'm always wondering about is ultimately you do have this huge communications giant, Telefonica, that kind of gets looks at maybe investing more. And so how do you balance, you know, this huge corporate coming in and doing what they want to, having their way with these startup companies? Those are two questions.
Two questions. So the first one, is London over incubated? Categorically and mathematically, no, it's not. So when we opened Wayra, we received 1,031 applications. So
this 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Okay.
So last May, I think it was May 2012. So,
one year ago.
So
1 year
yeah,
and 4 months.
Okay. And now we've moved to a global call process where we typically get more than 3,000 applications.
Just for the London?
No, so that was now an international call. But you know, what we're seeing is, you know, an exponential number of startups wanting to be part of an acceleration program. And I think that mathematically what that suggests to me is there's ample scope for more accelerators, in my opinion. But, it's a big but, it's not about the number and the quantity and the number of spaces available, it's about the quality. And I am acutely concerned about just how many accelerators there are, how many spaces are available, that, you know, and how good they are. And frankly, the EU are going to pour a ton of money into this, which means a load of really well-intended people are going to be really compelled by it, because, as I said, everybody wants to fuck around with startups. So we're going to see accelerators and incubators popping up everywhere. Some might be very good. I think generally the quality will be really poor, and I think that however well-intended they are, unless they leverage the kind of differentiators and value adds that you know, a big corporate can bring with their corporate muscle and then all their customers, then they're just going to muddy all the waters, frankly. Now, it's very easy to point the finger and say, oh, that's just an incumbent being defensive of maintaining and protecting their current state. And it isn't. I talked to the VC guys as well, and they share the same concern. And actually, the EU money is well-intended also, but it's pointing the wrong place. We have what we call the missing middle, which is the bit post-accelerator, pre-VC. There's just a gap. There's a gargantuan gap. And if any money was going to be poured anyway, it should be poured into that gap, in my opinion. With regard to big corporates, you know, fiddling around and doing unspeakable things.
I mean, the power of the purse, you know, they are paying the bills.
Yeah. Are they going to fiddle around with these guys and do horrible things to them and then, abuse them and all that kind of stuff?
Monthly beating.
Yeah. Well, I have to excuse my language, but, not on my watch because, I've invested my reputation in this thing to such an extent that, I'm not prepared for people to fuck about with it, with these guys, whilst I'm around, and I've got no intention of going anywhere. And even if I did, I'm so connected to the whole thing. I would trust that people would sort of pick up the phone, and I am aware of it. I think that there's a lesson for all small businesses. Though I describe small businesses versus big businesses a bit like boxers. And I think, the corporates are the super heavyweights, the startups are the flyweights. Now, I don't think the corporates know the power of their punch. I don't think they deliberately set out to annihilate small businesses. What they don't realise is one cancelled order can basically bankrupt the small guy. And so the thing that small businesses need is a champion, an advocate. And they should think of that champion as a fire alarm. So what you want in the event of fire is not somebody who's really senior. So everybody thinks that they need a director or the CEO to be behind them. It's not what you need. In the event of fire, you need somebody who's going to shout really loudly. That's what's going to save you. And if you've got somebody there, I've helped encourage some startups directly into Telefonica before I was doing Wayra. Inevitably, unfortunately, things went wrong. I was able to protect those small businesses and got things put right again. And, nearly always when that happens, when you actually get through to the person at the very top of that chain or whatever, when you explain to them what's happened, they go, oh, shit, I never even knew. Because if you're a Telefonica or a Microsoft, you're used to dealing with like a Nokia, and you're not used to dealing with a guy who employs 3 people. So, it's sometimes, and I think that, there's a lot of talk about this. I went to a political thing and they were saying, terrible corporates not doing enough to support small businesses and they should do more with more small businesses. They're fundamentally not engineered to. They're engineered to go and hammer out a corporate deal with Google. Do you know what I mean?
And keep their market share. I mean, we always knock into innovator's dilemma here and why it exists and why it will exist forever. Yeah. I guess, do you think, before you go, Colin, do you think the wrong incubation can kill a company? Not delay it, but just kill it.
I think actually that's a very good question. Sometimes it should. So our job is not necessarily to define the destiny of a company, but it's to help get them to that destiny quicker. Now, fail fast is not a bad thing. And, if that was basically an unviable business, helping them and supporting them, particularly supporting them financially through that process to explosion, sometimes that's okay, in my view. Where I think, do some accelerators or incubators have the wrong methodology? Absolutely. I've spoken to several who talk to me about, their theory. And I'm bemused by some of it. I can't see how you can. Our programs are really quite long, chronologically.
1 year or more?
Well, we're moving to a cycle of rotation every 4 months, but the idea is to extend. So if you're a really good startup and you meet your milestone, we'll extend you. So you go from 4 to 8 months, and then from 8 to 12. So the idea is we're trying to get people to a long period. But frankly, if they don't meet the milestone sooner, then we can, part company quicker. But typically, we're working with these guys for probably the best part of 9 months currently, is our current average in Europe. But there are startup accelerator programs out there that, are 3 weeks. I mean, Christ, we barely even get to know them in 3 weeks, let alone accelerate them.
That's short.
That kind of really freaks me out when I hear about these programs. And, and that's why I kind of worry about some of the other programs because, we are very much a location-specific program because we're very participative. You've got to be there. So unless you're there, you can't get the benefit from it. So, and then you've got to be there, and it's like a long time period because we want to really grow your business. So, and that's the decision we've made. Now, I'm not saying it's the right choice, and I'm not saying that other people can't do it in other ways, but there's a real logic to how we got to where we got to. So anybody that says, right, well, we're virtual, instantly I'm thinking, well, how are you going to get all the cross-fertilisation, cross-pollination of your talent from peer to peer? If they're not physically in a room, how do you make that happen? It's possible, but it's harder, right? And then if you're only going to do it once a week for 6 weeks, how are you going to get that exchange? So we've come at this from a point of view of what we think is the most appropriate methodology. What's great about having 14 is if we only had one, we could only evolve our program at the rate of one. But we have 14, all led by amazing people. So we're actually evolving and iterating Wayra at a rate of about 20. So the problem I have is keeping up with the damn thing.
Sounds like a busy day. What did I miss, Colin?
Yeah, you guys invest 40,000 euros. Yeah. Do you ever think that's just not enough? And that
it's deliberately not enough.
Right.
So we invested quite a lot more at one point, and I thought about it hard, and we debated it long and hard. And ultimately, my thought was, it's enough to get rid of the obstacles that might prevent you from joining Wayra, but it's not enough for you to live off. So the idea is you've got to come preconditioned to having you've either decided to compromise your lifestyle and only live off baked beans, or you've got savings, or you've got friend and family investment, or you've got an angel investor, or you've got revenue. But if you haven't got one of those 5 things, you're not going to survive the time. So we're looking for people who figured that out and are on it. Now, it doesn't mean they have to have solved it, but they need to be on it.
So is that why they're older typically?
I guess. It's a self-selecting thing. I don't want people who rock up, hey, let's start a startup, because it's like they haven't got a job, basically. That's the wrong motivation. I want people who are, made a life decision to pursue a dream.
It is a danger these days, and I find myself, even the more shows we do, is that a lot of people we meet at Drink About, it's like, it's the new rock star.
Yeah.
I want to do a startup.
Right.
It's going to do this. It's going to do that. Look at the exits. And then you visit them, and Colin and I have, and you realize it's a grind, man. It's grind. It's a stressful. You don't know where your payroll is going to come from. You're living off savings.
It's hard.
And,
it's really hard.
the vast majority are going to fail.
Right.
And the mortality rate at early stage is just ridiculous. But it's ridiculously hard work. It's not just a bit hard work. Why would anybody do this? It's just nuts, right? But it is amazing. And what I think, we've got the best opportunity on earth right now. There's never been more opportunity than there is right now, and that's why it's so exciting. And what I see in our cohorts is, it's not just collaboration. These are comrades who are fighting to change the world. And absolutely, my passion isn't necessarily for entrepreneurs or for startups. It's world changers. And that's what I'm saying. And I think that that's if you're compelled to do anything, I'm compelled to help them do that. And actually, it's nothing to do with the money, if the truth be known.
Yeah, the energy is infectious. It's like why we started the show, because it's really hard once you go to some of these events. It's just nice to see people excited and change. And I always joke with Colin, it's like you meet people that enjoy their jobs, which is rare. So it's refreshing. I was wondering, I looked at your 10 startups, and it's everybody from genomics to job skills to skin analysis. Yeah. And you mentioned that one of the reasons you're going to succeed is that you have the whole Telefonica enterprise. But do you find yourself trending towards one way or another? Obviously we know fintech's big in London. It's something that comes a lot on this show. Doesn't look like you're looking to specialize that. Is it something that ultimately leverages Telefonica's assets?
So at the moment we're really generic in our calls. So digital, but can be really eclectic. What I love about the cohorts is there are always surprises. Unfortunately, that's both good and bad news. So
you say cohort. You got to describe cohort.
So a cohort is the group. It's the group. It's like a semester, if you like. It's like the at the moment they're coming in bands. So we have 10 teams who've just joined Wayra Unlimited, and that's our cohort. So
okay. They say language is everything, and you call your places academies.
Academies,
well. That's very important. Languages. So cohort. So there.
So it's a cohort. It's a group. It's a group of 10.
It's a group, but
10 10 different startups, okay? So what's amazing about them, and part of this is joyful, the other part of it is heartbreaking, is you can't help when you get to know them to form an opinion and have your own view. You want to love all of your children equally, but it's just inevitable. Some you think are rock stars and others you think, it's not going to work. What's incredible is in the journey, always, without exception, there are some that literally swap those camps. Right. And they go from rock stars to maniacs and completely implode. And you got other ones. I've got this one team who are incredible. Two very unassuming guys who talk about what they're doing. And then you ask them, so who's your competition? And they say, Microsoft and Google. And you think, oh, God. And then they show you what they've built, and you think, actually, they might have just done it.
Wow.
And literally the investors queue up outside there. We call them a pod, so they're the home that they're in. The investors, after a while, you see 2 or 3 investors hanging out, and then the others see that, and then they form a bit of a queue. And you think, these guys are definitely onto something. And what they're going to do, it's called Hiri, it's in Dublin, and they're going to transform corporate email. And they really are going to transform corporate email. I'm sure of it.
Good. It needs a transformation.
Yeah.
Email seems like it's stuck in the dark ages, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean,
totally.
Yeah, it's like this
It's
whole
just not
list
intelligent.
of messages.
It's not personal anymore, I find.
Yeah.
It's got my name on it when you email it to me, but then it's just, that's all it happens. It's not like, okay, well, you're actually going to care about that one and not about this one. Yeah.
If you had to, say, God forbid, you got sacked tomorrow and you had a non-compete and you can't do what you do anymore at Wayra, I don't mean this in a bad way, and we gave you some capital to go start your own business, what's the sector that you find very exciting right now? And be as specific as you can.
Yeah. I'm very lucky. I have a multitude of interests outside of Telefonica and outside Wayra, and recently my portfolio has just grown. In the last 3 weeks, I've taken a decision a while ago to kind of stand down from some of my long-standing commitments, and I've taken on some new ones, and there are various reasons for that.
Commitments as in like board members?
Yeah,
or,
so I've taken 4 new board appointments just in the last couple of weeks.
And you've gotten rid of some?
Yeah, I've stood down from a few, which is a very difficult thing to do. So in terms of answering your question, the areas that really interest me, I'm fascinated by technology, particularly the digital economy and the revolution that it brings. I think that it's the most profound thing to have happened in the history of humanity. I think it's more profound than the Industrial Revolution. I think it's not yet commonly understood. I think that we will look back at this era and this time and we'll realise how incredible the changes are that are happening. And some of those that interest me most, I'm really passionate, for instance, to be really specific, driverless car technology. I think it will change our lives immeasurably. People stop at the incredulity of being in a vehicle that doesn't have a driver, and they don't go beyond that, but it's going to change absolutely everything. I mean, why would you bother even owning a car when you can summons one at your beck and call?
And traffic is such an inefficiency.
It's
Jesus, what's the drag on GDP in London of just traffic? Inefficient movement of cars.
And then it's not just that, though, is it? It's, all of the infrastructure behind it, traffic lights and everything else, become completely irrelevant. The parking in my street, we cleared the street for the Jubilee last year, and we realised that we've actually got a motorway down our street because we have 2 lanes that are just full of stationary vehicles. So every house has got between 20 and 40,000 pounds worth of idle asset just sat there doing nothing. Why would you have that? So new economy is going to be built not only in the creation and maintenance of those vehicles and how that's going to work, the repurposing of all our parking and our car parking facilities and car parks and all the rest of it, even the repurposing of petrol stations. Why would you bother going to a petrol station when the car can go and fuel itself? You wouldn't bother, So, and I love the idea of claiming back those residential streets and greening them and enabling our children to play on them. Do you know in Britain something like, is it 9,500 people a year are critically injured in motoring accidents? Wow. You think about all the medical costs that go related to that. These cars are going to become literally uncrashable And I mean it, the mortality is going to become microscopic.
And third world countries is triple the amount.
Sure, I drove around China and India. I think India last year had about 130,000 deaths.
It's incredible.
Traffic or from accidents.
It's terrible, And so people think about, oh golly, there's going to be nobody in my car, but it's going to change our lives. So if you think about what's happened in the music industry, where digital music has become almost worthless. But then you look at the value of the live performance, because you can't frig the live performance, right? So people now pay. A friend of mine just paid 150 quid to go and see Rod Stewart. I think it's an incredible thing. Anyway, I think the same is going to happen with conversations. We currently have all these different devices, and we currently call one a mobile phone, another a tablet, and another a television. But the reality is my television in my front room now can pretty much do everything my mobile phone can do. So why are we calling it those different things? They're just screens, different sizes. If you can have an intelligent conversation with anybody, anywhere in the world, at any time, and I don't just mean the people in your phone directory who you know, but also the connectivity, I can't believe that there's so many people follow me on Twitter, all that kind of stuff, and, they have immediate access to me 24 hours a day, It's going to change the conversation. So what that then means is who you choose to be with right now is going to become exponentially even more important. It's going to become the equivalent of the concert ticket. And I think, so what we're going to see is with with 3D printing, you're going to see a complete transformation in the aviation industry. I think it's incredible, the debate that's being had in London right now about, the possibility of another runway. We don't need to be predicting and planning for, a doubling of air traffic. We need to be planning for 100-fold. My colleague, Anne Parker, who helped build Wayra, has just yesterday landed in Australia for her new life to build incubators and accelerators for Telstra out there. It took her almost a day and a half to fly there, right? Crazy. In the future, we're going to be flying to Australia in 4 hours.
Is it the Hyperloop thing?
Well, it's not just that. It's the fact that, if you think about aviation, the plane weighs, so much and it burns so much fuel just physically getting in the air. But if you can 3D print it, you can cut that weight to a fraction of its current weight. When I was a kid, as cars evolved, they were really notable. When Ford launched the next Cortina, it was a big deal. And also, when the registration plate changed, it was a big deal. You'd look out for the new license plate. We just had a new license plate this week. You got any idea what it is? I have no idea what it is. Have you seen one?
No.
Really? But the new Dreamliner is going to fundamentally affect jet lag. So we went from 8-hour flight causing significant impact on personal welfare to an 8-hour flight not having a significant impact. We're going to be as interested in the next plane technology as we were when I was a kid in the next Cortina. Now, the delta, the incremental improvement on cars is tiny. When I had a Ford Fiesta, when you hit a hill, it literally slowed down. Now, a Ford Fiesta, it costs you £2. They go 120 miles an hour. They have aircon, central locking, sat nav, MP3 players, and God knows what else in them. It's really, it's incredible, and they all drive like Ferraris. So I think we're going to see just a fundamental change in how we live our lives, and I think I might see that in my lifetime, but I know for certain my children absolutely will. And, I remember the impact that iPod had on music. I think we're about to see the same transition happen to, for instance, cash. Keep some. It's a souvenir because it's not going to be around for much longer. If the technology companies applied the same endeavour to cash as they did music, it would be obsolete, not in our lifetime, it'd be obsolete by 2016.
A lot of young people don't carry cash. Like the whole concept of leaving the house with money, which my grandpa always taught me. They're like, whatever, it's my debit card. It drives me crazy. I was wondering if you could tell us one of the failures at Wayra and why it failed and why that won't happen again. I mean, you were a new company, 16 months ago. Did you get anything wrong?
Oh, golly, man. The list is too long. And I think this is one of the real problems with entrepreneurialism within a corporate. Corporates tend to like everything to be done brilliantly and to perfection. Let's be really clear. The Wayra Europe team is 3 people. It's me, Maureen, who's my EA, worked with me for years, and one other person. So I've currently got somebody on secondment. We don't have armies of people. So that means that we're choosing very carefully the most powerful action that's going to move Wayra and our businesses and our book value forward. And there is a ton of things we're not doing, a ton of things. And if my corporate colleagues came in and lifted the lid on it, you know, I'm sure they would find all sorts of reasons to complain at me about the deficiencies that I have. You know, and I think that's an uneasy tension. I'm confident that we'll get there, and I don't want it to sound like we're in absolute free-fall chaos, but, you know, this is a difficult thing to do, and we are evolving and learning, and we're a startup ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. So
would it ever spin off? Would Wayra ever spin off and get your own
honestly,
VC funding? When you said we're talking to VCs, I thought Wayra was talking to VCs.
Yeah, that was, you know, you talk about that huge gap, and as you have this alumni and they're all looking for funding, and you know them, you already are invested in them, and you have, you know, a massive Telefonica in the background to potentially be a Series A for a lot of these guys.
I think, listen, look, this is my personal opinion. I've not got any indication from Telefonica. I cannot imagine Wayra staying in Telefonica indefinitely. It just doesn't fit in my head. You know, this current kind of, if you like, renaissance in accelerators. Actually, there are lots of lead indicators that have gone before. There was a massive corporate venturing movement about 10 years or so ago, 10, 15 years ago. Every big corporate had a venturing division. Many of them spun out. You know, I think the same thing will kind of inevitably happen. I don't see it happening in the immediate future, but I do see it happening longer term, and I think it'll be a good thing. And I hope that it doesn't happen with a complete severing of the connection and value exchange that exists between Wayra and Telefonica. I hope that, you know, we can always maintain that. But, you know, we have to affect change because, for loads of reasons. I mean, just, I got asked twice yesterday, you know, how am I remunerated, you know, publicly in front of, you know, big audiences.
So you have to tell the truth.
Yeah, well, I'm salaried, you know, and to a lot of people it just doesn't work. You know, if I'm passionate about the book value of our investments, then, you know, logic sort of says that I should put my money where my mouth is and be remunerated against that book value. But I'm not, and that kind of methodology right now doesn't fit with, you know, if I went to the corporate HR team and said, you know, let's do that then, they kind of scratch their heads and sort of say, well, that's not how we do things around here. So, you know, I think longer term it will go. And in terms of my biggest failings, my biggest failing was the euphoria of building the first academy. Everybody said that it would take approximately 18 months, and we did it in 100 days, including the launch of the actual program and selecting the startups.
Where was the first one?
My first one was London. So
okay.
The very first one was in Colombia, but my first one was London. And it was incredible. We had a monster of pressure, which was the Olympics. We wanted to get out pre-Olympics. Okay. We opened the doors, great, all these amazing startups who I thought were the best ones ever. And then I thought, Christ, now what do we do? And, you know, literally it's like, golly, what do we do now? You know, now I've got to accelerate them, and you know, bless them. They forgive me all my, you know, deficiencies and all the rest of it, and we learned together. And they helped craft the very first program that I was responsible for. And now I think we've really nailed it. But you know, it's a constant journey.
You know, we always hear that people in London compare themselves against Silicon Valley, Silicon Alley, and they would talk about complain that London hasn't had the exits that they've had in the Bay Area, and therefore those founders haven't reinvested the capital into other things, you know, the PayPal effect and all that stuff.
Yeah.
You have a unique perspective because you see Latin America too. Yeah. You know, you're not just in London, but What do you think about that? Is it taken too far sometimes?
No, I think there's a lot of validity to it. I mean, let's be really clear. I mean, Silicon Valley has got some amazing successes under its belt, and in many ways, what we're doing is trying to replicate their success. I think we describe ourselves as trying to create Silicon Valleys all over the world. We're trying to prevent people from feeling compelled that it's their only option, their only life choice is to go to California. That it's viable for them to incubate their business, indigenously in the country where they're from. And I think that I'm curious to see the effect that that's going to have. I think that could be really quite colourful. What happens when a social network is born in Buenos Aires? It might look and smell completely different to one born in the States. But your point is well made. We haven't had those remarkable exits. And I think that a major part of that in Europe is because we're not yet a united Europe. We're still very fragmented. So in America, when they really get their shoulder behind a business, boy, do they do it well. I mean, they've got hundreds of millions of customers and who all speak the same language and all, embrace it. But over here, everything is fragmented. And in fact, many of the startups, in my view, in Europe, are mistaken in their endeavour by just simply copying and creating a local Me Too version of a bigger entity. Yeah. I understand absolutely their strategy, their thinking methodology, and often it's because they think if they crack it, they'll just instantly be bought. But actually, all we're doing is fragmenting the market even further. So what we're not getting is the natural escalation that you see in America, where these companies go from being small to big to huge. In Europe, they kind of do something interesting and then they stop.
Right, because they can't scale the same way. They can't
scale. Right. And actually scaling is more important than starting. So I think that there are more jobs, more...
That's a core to the episode.
I think that's, I think more economy is generated from scaling up than starting up. And I think in Europe, we've got to find better mechanisms that generate vast scale more quickly. And it could be as simple as language translation. It could be as simple as currency. I'm not sure what it is, but right now, I think that bit in Europe is broken.
Yeah, we've had a few startups that walk on out and they're like, yeah, we're launching our German site. It's got to be in German. We got to go to Munich. And it's like, Jesus.
It can't be .com. Do you know what I mean? Like they want their own .fr.
And that's just one country.
Yeah. I really apologize for the flu, by the way.
We all have a bit of it. Before I hit him with the advice question, Colin, is there anything I missed? Any gaping pieces of this story that we're not covering?
No, I think essentially Wayra is collecting a ton of data too about startups. Yes. And I think that's a really interesting thing. So maybe that'll lead into the advice question about what are you seeing sort of common themes of success and failures of the different people and companies that are going through Wayra?
So I think on the successes side, in terms of valuations, the area that seems to be generating the most interest and the strongest valuations is in the space of identification, security and e-commerce. And there is a clear, that's rapidly sort of emerging itself as a giant, frankly. So very well-intended startups with great entrepreneurs who are doing something much more eclectic and representative of themselves aren't getting anywhere near what those guys are doing.
Cool. Is that security and e-commerce or just pure e-commerce?
It's a blend.
Okay, of those three things.
Yeah, it's a blend of those things. And what I love about that is the opportunity for Telefonica to really add a new level of input and value into that. So, for instance, Apple have made a lot of noise with their biometric stuff, the fingerprint technology, whatever. Yeah. But theoretically, your device, it knows where you said you were going to be according to your diary. It could know all your banking details and everything else. But the one bit that we could add into that nobody can easily frig today is your proximity, possibly between your devices, and the proximity of those devices relative to our mobile mast. So you said you were going to be in Barcelona, are your devices in Barcelona or not? And I think that kind of stuff is quite interesting. We're not actually mining that yet. All the stuff we're seeing is, other more inventive solutions than that. Sure. So in Ireland we have...
Well, like your phone is always within this proximity of your laptop Oh, right now it's 2 miles away.
Yeah, it's a good like secondary security check or something.
Yeah.
And the whole notion of quantified self. So at the moment we've got, Fitbit and technology that's helping people to improve their lives and their well-being. But actually the data that's coming out of that could actually establish patterns that, you are typically on a train at this time of day. So if somebody's trying to transact your card in Glasgow, it's probably not you, because you would typically, so we could use those metrics for people's advantage. And I think that that's something that's got a huge amount of potential. The other one is in London, we have a team called Narrato, and they are all about quantified self. And they're taking that to another level again. So it's not just the kind of stuff you saw with the Nike wristband. It's really taking a holistic view of all of your data and mapping that out, again, for your advantage.
Okay, I'm hitting you with the advice question. Everyone has answered this question. So I'm going to ask you, if you could make a phone call to the 20-year-old Simon and give that young man a bit of advice, what would you tell him?
There's a scene in Little Miss Sunshine that you should pay great attention to.
Great movie.
Yeah, pay attention to that. But apart from that, I don't know. I mean, to the younger version of me, I'd say go and find Mrs. Devonshire sooner, because that was a good move. Punching so much above my weight, it's unbelievable.
It's good to feel that way always in a relationship.
Yeah, cha-ching. Those are some points being counted there. Back home.
Right. She'll never see this.
What are you saying?
I don't know. I think so. I'm really lucky, right? So I've achieved. I'm 197. I'm constantly telling everybody I'm 27, but it's not working anymore. I've achieved more in my life than I ever imagined possible. So I'm pretty cool with that. I think in terms of to younger people generally, it's funny. O2 have got this advertising campaign called Be More Dog. I was just unbelievably hungry. I started off as a runner. I had no qualifications, nothing.
For who?
I started for a family-run marketing advertising agency.
Okay.
And my job was to deliver artwork in London. And I just worked my way up through the advertising industry until I got to the point of sort of running an agency, pretty much. I worry that the kids just don't have that hunger. I'm not saying that they all need to aspire to be Zuckerberg and to create startups. That isn't the point. Just really apply yourself unreservedly. And I've always been really lucky that I've always known what I wanted to do. So I always wanted to be in marketing. That was the starting point. And I think having that focus was really helpful. So I'd say be really, really focused.
Be the dog. Is that the marketing?
Be the dog.
Be the dog.
Be dog. Yeah, be hungry. Dog. Yeah, be really hungry.
Be ready to be hungry and be ready to take some lumps and do some things you don't want to do, like run all day.
Just go for it. Just go for
Everyone has to start somewhere. I think a lot of kids now that you meet, they just think they're going to sort of skyrocket into a successful startup. Yeah. It's just like, it does happen, but a lot of the time you got to work for free places, you have to learn the ropes, and you have to just network and make contacts.
I love air-cooled vehicles, but what happened when young people just felt entitled to have a Porsche? Because that didn't happen when I was their age. And I kind of sense that now. I think. Do you not think that?
Now we sound like grumpy old men.
I know.
Colin and I say this all the time, and like I noticed it with the Gen Me or Gen We or whatever the Gen it is right now. But this whole self-entitlement, like, oh no, I should be doing this now, and maybe I'm remembering my past in the wrong way. But I was like, I put in the time, I took the lumps, I got coffees for people,
Brian and I are both I used to be a currency trader, and Brian was derivatives trader. But so I find in the finance industry too, you really, if you're young like that and you step onto a trading floor thinking you're more than you are, you just get shot down so unbelievably fast. Really? Wow. So it's good training ground for, again, being hungry and it just doesn't work. You'll get kicked off that floor so fast if you think you're above some of the other guys.
Yeah. Good.
Maybe that's something. All right, well, you actually answered the third part of the advice question, which was advice to the 20-year-old. So that is good advice. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Oh, golly, over the years. It's so much, it's hard to recall one specific bit. But the one that I'll really focus on is when we created One Water, we begged, stole and borrowed from everybody to help us do that. And we had a...
what is One Water?
One Water is a brand of bottled water that we sell in the Western world to fund, it's a not-for-profit, we fund the creation of water wells in Africa. We started in 2004, we generated and donated more than 8 million, which I think has provided clean water for more than 2 million people. And we just, last week, Duncan Goose, who runs it, he's a legend, he just got listed in Starbucks in the UK, which is awesome. So, it's been a roller coaster, but it's had some amazing highs. We've worked with some incredible people, and the first label designer was a friend of Duncan's, and he said, he did everything pro bono. And we were saying, why do you do that? Because I get to hang out with some really cool people and meet some amazing people. And then later on in that journey, I got to have a couple of one-to-ones with people who I've regarded as lifetime sort of legends, people that you can't imagine you're ever going to meet, let alone sit down in a room and just have a private conversation with them. And so, he told me what his motivation was, and I sort of really took it to heart, and it became true for me too. So I'm really into that kind of, just give unreservedly and you'd be amazed what you kind of get back thing. That's
good advice. What was the scene in Little Miss Sunshine?
It was when the granddad is in the back of the camper and he says to his grandson, you've got to fuck a lot of women. I think it was a metaphor. I just hasten to add. But anyway.
He had the best lines in that movie, man.
That was a really good movie.
Yeah,
it was the way he repeated it, and every time he repeated it, his son was just his head in his hands, and it was just the whole chemistry.
I'm gonna go watch that. I can't. I mean, I love that movie every time it comes on. You can't watch it enough. How do people get in touch with you if they want to be part of Wayra? Do they have to wait until the annual cycle? Is it a 4-month cycle? Do you make exceptions?
We don't make exceptions. So everybody has to go through the application process, but we do really try and help people through it. So that process, can be quite biased deliberately, because what we found is that people who we connect with, guess what? They somehow. They are more determined. They're more committed. They go the extra mile to find their way into the. So I have Fernando from Higher Life. Every gig I went to was at the back of the room waving at me. I was thinking, how did that guy do that? I have no idea how he did it. And so we actually really embrace and encourage that. It's really easy. We're very accessible, and the amazing thing is Twitter. Okay. So before I started this, I started in January 2012, never been on Twitter before, started using Twitter. And the London scene is especially good, and now we're seeing it in every country. Follow us at Wayra UK, and we tell people what we're doing and when we've got events, and you can just ask to come up and, can I attend this event? Or we host occasionally external events. So tonight we have the Institute of Direct Marketing in. Follow them and ask them if you can come. And come and hang out, talk to the entrepreneurs, find out don't listen to whether or not I think it works, talk to the people who are in the program, and they'll tell you whether or not they like it or not, and then you can make an informed decision about whether it's right for you. Get to know the team, get to know Charmaine and Tom and Toby and Alex and the people who actually run the building, who are there all the time, and go hang out with them, and that way kind of get in. And you can follow me as well, but I'm all over the shop.
What's your Twitter address?
I have two. So I have at Simon Devonshire, which is interesting because that's my name, and I have another one which is at Tallman Business, which is the name of my blog.
Okay,
so that's where I impart slightly more than 140 characters of stuff about the digital economy and changing the world changes, and how to run a successful startup.
Quick question on the people getting hold. What stage of startup do you guys look for? Is it
so really early stage?
Okay.
So we say typically we used to say less than 2 years old, less than 100,000 euros invested. The truth is that line is blurring now, and we are taking some much more established startups. We will take individuals, but we tend not to. We tend to choose teams. Okay. If you come in as an individual, your first job will be to recruit a team. So we're really looking for people who've got the capability of realizing their vision. So they've got a plan, they've got an idea, and they've between them got the resources to actually manifest that, and that's really important. Cool. But it could be just a piece of paper, and there's certainly some are pre-alpha, some pre-beta, some are in trial but pre-revenue, and the milestones we set are all about moving them on.
Cool. And is there a formal process? Do you have that annual cycle? I know you just...
Yeah, we're about to launch. So watch us any day now. We're going to open up the next call. So Twitter's a great way to follow when the calls are open. And then the call process is all via our website. And it's not onerous. It does require commitment. It doesn't take days, but it does take a few hours. And we do... It's a bit of a pain in the ass. Things like there's a bit of video required. And people say, do you really select on that? I'm not sure we do, but what's interesting is about the teams that get in all happen to have brilliant videos, So it's kind of, do you know what I mean? Yeah. They're things that are there for a reason, and they do help us to filter.
So you'll start looking now for next year's class.
Absolutely.
And you'll decide by March, by June, by...
Yeah. So the next cohort will, the current plan is open the call literally within the next few days, so that will happen imminently. I think we'll close that call and judge it pre-Christmas, and we'll probably get the new cohort in the new year. I would
so
imagine.
It is every 4 months you're following that cycle?
I think we're going to start to get there,
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That was good.
Does that work?
I'm happy.
I'm happy.
I'm very happy. Any Silicon Reel news? On Twitter, we are at Silicon Reel, if you want to follow us.
Yep.
And anything else we got to tell people or what?
Yeah, guests keep sort of recommendations, and we're looking for interns. We need help. We got 13. This is our 13th episode. Each episode takes a little bit more time to our back catalog, so we're looking for help, looking for guys to help us as we grow as a startup, and hit us on Twitter. If
hit us up on Twitter if you want to do some business development for us, part-time or full-time. We can talk about it. I mean, it's a fun whole thing to be a part of Silicon Reel, and we're just looking for partners.
We won't be grumpy old men all the time.
No, we will be a little bit though. But yeah, so hook us up there. If you're listening to us on iTunes, you can come watch the show on YouTube. It's the channel Silicon Reel. And this is all about the scene. So please tell us who you want to see guest-wise. We've had a lot of founders, CEOs. We're going to have some startup people in. We're going to have some people that are just starting. And we still want to get a failure in. You still want to have someone who's just declared bankruptcy and just see what's going on through their head.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it can't all be about the success stories.
Yeah.
Anyways, as we say, it's about the people on Silicon Reel. Simon, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it. Cheers.
Cool. Take care. Then we'll do this. If it doesn't, we'll do that. Do you ever think that there's a point where it becomes too creative and not about the bottom line?
I do worry about that, and that's a perfectly valid criticism, because there's always the danger of ooh shiny, and we have hired all these amazing people.
Ooh shiny,
and we have a big ooh shiny room,
shiny,
right? Wow, woo shiny,
Right.
Let's try this out over here, let's try that over there. The trick